Good morning, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to thank Alessio and Chris for inviting me here today, and all of you for giving me your time. It really is an honour to be here. For those of you not familiar with Parkrun, we're a UK-registered charity that operates a global series of free, weekly, timed 5K and 2K events, where each week around 300,000 people walk, run or volunteer at any one of over 2,000 locations across 22 countries. This calendar year alone, we've delivered 100,000 different events and recorded 12 million instances of walking, running and volunteering. I hope that in the next 20 minutes I can share the Parkrun journey with you and some of the lessons we've learned along the way to hopefully stimulate further reflection and conversations around the future of running. A quick bit about me. In the late 1990s, I completed a BSc in Human Biology, Exercise and Health at Oxford Brookes University. Went on to become a personal trainer, as well as working in elite sport. And during that time, I also completed a master's degree in exercise science at Leeds Metropolitan University. After my master's degree, I went on to work full-time as a member of academic staff at the University of Leeds, teaching on the Sport and Exercise Science course between 2006 and 2010. During that time, in 2007, I met Parkrun founder Paul Sinton-Hewitt, and although I didn't know it at the time, mine and my family's life was about to change forever. Within a couple of years, I'd given up my safe and secure full-time lecturing job to volunteer full-time for Parkrun. Since early 2011, I've been a full-time paid employee, and today I am Parkrun's Chief Operating Officer, responsible for the delivery, management and support of all our events around the world. Going back in time to October 2004, Paul was a serious club runner in the UK, running 100 miles a week and completing marathons in just over 2.5 hours. At that time, however, his personal and professional life wasn't going that well, and he was finding things pretty challenging. He did have running, though, and his running friends to keep his head above the water. Whilst out for a run one day, he tripped over his dog, resulting in an injury that his physio said would stop him from running for an extended period of time. And suddenly, in his mind at least, he was no longer a runner and no longer able to access the running community that he needed so desperately. Paul, however, is very much a solutions person who had previously been involved with the running community in South Africa, where clubs would often put on time trials where their members could test themselves against the clock every week on the same course. In order to remain connected to his fellow West London runners, he decided to organise a free, weekly, 5-kilometre time trial in his local park. His friends would come along every week and test their fitness. He would stand there with a clipboard and a stopwatch, and they would all go for coffee afterwards. On the 2nd of October 2004, then, the first ever Bushy Parkrun took place, with 18 participants, made up of 13 runners and 5 volunteers, a group of people we now refer to as the Parkrun Pioneers. For the next couple of years, Bushy Parkrun took place every Saturday, plus Christmas Day and New Year's Day, and ever so slowly it increased in size. In early 2007, Wimbledon Common Parkrun started, quickly followed by Banstead Woods, meaning Paul now had 3 events all in West London. Also in 2007, as a triathlete and marathon runner myself, I'd seen what Paul was doing and wondered if I would be able to replicate his events where I lived in Leeds. It wasn't obvious that Paul was looking to expand Parkrun, and I had no idea how I'd be able to get the volunteers to deliver it, or even whether I wanted or needed a weekly Saturday morning commitment in my already busy life. At the university, however, we were looking to engage our students with the community around volunteering and sport, and so we contacted Paul to see if he would be willing to offer us any advice. To our great surprise, he immediately suggested we join the Parkrun family, offering to cover all of our costs, provide all of our equipment, and give us the training required for free in order to launch the 4th Parkrun event in the world and the first outside London. Are we getting some feedback down there? Do we need to... I don't know if the sound guys can hear that feedback on the, is that all right? Thanks. Thinking this too good to be true, myself and a colleague travelled down to meet with Paul to find out more and to decide for ourselves whether or not there really was a catch. But there wasn't. We asked Paul what his vision was and why he was so keen for us to sign up. To which he replied that, wouldn't it be great if there was a parkrun in every town in the world? Some would say that was ambitious. Some would say that was deluded. Fast forward 15 years, and I would say it was visionary. And this brings me to the first lesson that I learned from Paul that I'd like to share today. If Paul hadn't invented Parkrun, and Parkrun didn't exist, and I stood here today and told you that over the next 18 years we would deliver 544,000 different events where 5.2 million different people would participate as walkers, runners or volunteers 85 million times across 23 countries entirely for free, any self-respecting mass participation event expert would quite rightly and confidently declare that to be impossible. Only it isn't, because we've done it. Reflecting on Paul's 2007 vision and how we've got from there to here, despite endless years of being told we were deluded and we'd fail, it's important to note that rather than simply relying on relentless positivity and confidence in the absence of evidence, we accepted that whilst we did have this grand vision, we needed to focus on the challenge in front of us, day by day, week by week, year by year. How could we deliver 5 events on one weekend, then 10 events, then 50 events, then 500 events, then events in 2 countries, then 3 countries, then 10 countries? How could we accurately and quickly record 1,000 instances of participation per week, then 10,000, then 100,000? We achieved the impossible by opening our minds and focusing on what was right in front of us, without prejudging the outcome in any way, either negatively or positively. I wonder today, what else have we not done because we don't feel it's possible? We heard yesterday from my amazing friend and colleague, Carol Cunningham, who heads up our volunteer activity across Asia Pacific, and who talked about the way we recognise and celebrate volunteers. But we didn't always think that way. In fact, in the first 2 years of Parkrun, we didn't even record instances of volunteering. Like many organisations that rely on volunteers to make the magic happen, we saw volunteering as a purely operational and functional service required to allow other people to benefit from engagement in our events. We talked about giving up your time, giving back to your community and doing your bit, all of which present the act of volunteering in a negative light, putting people off and increasing resentment amongst those who do volunteer towards those who don't. For most of our first 10 years, we did everything we could to engineer volunteering out of our operating model, reducing the work required to deliver our events so that no one had to give up their run. We couldn't have been more wrong. To explain, let me use my own father as an example. Some years ago, he moved back to South Africa, his country of birth, and I went to visit him, suggesting that we go to Delta Parkrun in Johannesburg together so he could do something good for his health and me, but more importantly, he could meet some new people in his new city. That day, they had around 600 finishers, which meant that afterwards they had a pile of 600 finish tokens, all of which needed sorting back into order for the following week. So, my dad sat there in the cafe with a couple of people he'd never met before and spent the best part of an hour sorting them out. Now, my dad's the kind of person who constantly looks to improve things and make things better. So naturally, he suggested to me that this was a process that should be automated in order to save almost 3 hours of person time. To which I replied, why would I do that? You wouldn't have just made 2 new friends. Since then, we've worked hard to engineer in as many volunteer roles as possible, maximising the amount of person time required to make the magic happen. We'd been so certain, though, about such an important part of our events, yet we'd been so wrong. I wonder what else we're wrong about. When Paul first started Parkrun, he created the most incredibly simple event delivery model, with minimal, perhaps 0 rules and regulations, and participants supposedly responsible entirely for their own health and safety. When I first visited Bushy Parkrun in the summer of 2007, knowing there would be around 300 walkers and runners, I expected all the bells and whistles associated with a typical running event of that size. However, just 15 minutes before the start, there was almost no sign at all of the impending gathering. My wife and I asked someone where the start was. By that tree, they said. We asked where the finish was. By that tree. We asked where the course went. Round the park. We asked where to leave our bags. By the tree. To use a football term, this was quite clearly jumpers for goalposts, which is fine when you're small. It took 9 years until we first experienced a cardiac arrest at a Parkrun event. Thankfully, that person survived and is now a friend of mine and has since completed 250 Parkruns. He was a very fit marathon runner with no underlying health issues and collapsed on the start line before he'd even taken a step. Medically qualified Parkrunners who happened to be there delivered CPR, an ambulance was called, a defib applied, and all ended well. And because of the circumstances, and that being the only serious medical event to that date, we put it down to horrendous bad luck and naively assumed it might be at least another 9 years until the next one. The following year, 2014, however, we tragically experienced our first fatality. Again, an otherwise healthy male Parkrunner with a strong athletic background, but despite this being our first fatality in 10 years of operating, it was clear to us then that as the number of events grew, as well as the number of participants at those events, and if we were to achieve our grand vision of thousands of Parkruns and millions of Parkrunners, these kinds of serious medical incidents would become much more common. There was then mounting pressure on us to provide paid qualified first aiders across all of our events, something that went against our keep it simple and scalable principles of event delivery, and even more so against our belief that people should as much as possible be responsible for themselves. It was also not financially viable for us at scale, and companies that provided medical support to events didn't have the capacity to deliver their services across thousands of Parkrun locations 52 weeks of the year. One school of thought at the time was also that if people were running on their own, they wouldn't have medical support, and Parkrun was meant to be akin to a simple walk or run in the park with your friends. So why should Parkrun be any different? In fact, at times, there was quite strong resistance from people considering meaningful medical provision, health and safety gone mad. The answer, of course, was clear. People were going to collapse, and quite clearly we could intervene in a way that could save their life. But this clash between a clear moral obligation to do the right thing and maximize the chances of a positive outcome following a cardiac arrest, against the operational and financial constraints and limitations, forced us to carefully consider what the actual problem was and look to solve that actual problem rather than simply tick a bureaucratic box to cover our backs, one that would almost certainly break Parkrun and do far more public health damage than public health good. The actual problem was how do we save someone's life if they collapse, not how do we apply existing guidelines for running events that weren't based on or sympathetic to our events. We spent time carefully considering all the evidence we'd gathered to that date. We reflected on our experience. We consulted with experts in sports medicine and balanced all of that against our available resources at that time and in the context of predicted future growth. There are two critical actions when faced with a cardiac arrest: minimizing time to commencement of CPR and provision of a defibrillator as quickly as possible. In a Parkrun setting, it was clear, demonstrated through our own insight work, that so many people already in attendance were qualified to deliver CPR and willing to do so, that the first of those two actions was already in hand. To evidence that, we carried out survey work asking people whether or not they were qualified to deliver CPR and whether or not they would do so in an emergency situation. We do also record centrally all of our critical medical incidents from around the world, detailing their specific circumstances, and without exception, we have seen CPR delivered by qualified individuals from within the community as quick or quicker than any paid provision could ever have done so, almost always within 1 to 2 minutes. However, relying on the emergency services for the provision of defibrillators simply does not work, where despite the best intentions of all involved, the time taken for them to arrive almost always far exceeds that needed to positively impact the outcome. The solution was therefore clear. We needed all of our events to have access to a defibrillator. By the end of 2018, all our 5K events in the UK had one. Within a year or so, all our junior events had one, and all our Australian 5K events, representing by then around 75% of our global event footprint. In July 2021, a group of the world's most experienced sports medics published a peer-reviewed paper in the British Journal of Sports Medicine, looking specifically at the history and outcomes of serious medical incidents at Parkrun UK events, finding an observed cardiac arrest survival rate of 65% in the context of near uniform utilization of automated external defibrillators, substantially better than the reported out-of-hospital cardiac arrest survival rates worldwide of approximately 10%. Concluding, participation in 5-kilometer community running and walking parkrun is associated with an exceptionally low incidence of serious life-threatening and fatal medical events. Accordingly, this rapidly growing mass participation community-based exercise program appears to be safe and viable means of promoting physical activity on a large scale. Our belief is that too often those most in need of physical activity, and therefore with most to gain, are put off or excluded by excessive medical screening, only to increase their chances of heart disease and future cardiac arrest. Rather, we want to minimize the number of cardiac incidents across the entire population by improving health and well-being. And if someone does collapse at a parkrun, we want to maximize the chances of them surviving. Fast forward to today. Over 1,600 of our 2,200 events around the world have direct access to a defibrillator, and we're about to finalize an order for the remaining 600 self-funded through our own charity, meaning that we should achieve 100% coverage of all events around the world early in 2023. It would have been easy back in 2014 to apply a solution that didn't work to a problem we didn't understand. We'd have been compliant with published guidelines for running events, and our backs would have been covered. But we wouldn't be sitting here today able to say we did the right thing, both by our participants themselves and the wider parkrun movement. I was listening to a podcast recently and came across a lovely statement. A candle that lights another loses nothing. We heard a lot yesterday about the value of collaboration, which is fantastic, and I couldn't agree more. Unfortunately, our experience historically has been a resistance to collaboration, particularly from established and already successful organizations. But we've learned along the years that not only can we not do everything, but to overcome many challenges or capitalize on many opportunities, there are often other people and organizations capable of doing great things, greater than we could ever achieve, if only they had the support. In the UK and Ireland, we partner, for example, with a wonderful charity called Move Against Cancer, who invite people impacted by cancer to join them every last Saturday of the month at parkrun events at an initiative, called 5K Your Way. They now have over 70 of these monthly cancer support groups, positively impacting the health and happiness of hundreds of people who have most to gain from being outdoors, active and social, but for whom many reasons are often excluded from organised physical activity. We benefit from increased diversity at our events, in this case around people dealing with long-term conditions, and 5K Your Way benefit from free use of our event ecosystem within which their groups can operate effectively. Also in the UK, we partner with the Royal College of General Practitioners, the RCGP, and there are now around 1,600 UK GP practices, that's about 20% of all UK GP practices, formally registered with the Royal College as parkrun practices, with a commitment to prescribe parkrun to their patients, not just where they might benefit from increased physical activity, but where they may be dealing with loneliness and would benefit from better engagement with their community. Again, we benefit from our events engaging many more people who would typically be marginalised and excluded, and the GP practices benefit from access to an inclusive and accessible opportunity for their patients. We also collaborate with the prison services around the world, and so far have 40 events on custodial sites across the UK, Ireland and Australia. An incredible 13,000 people have walked, run and volunteered across these secure events, recording 55,000 instances of participation. Quoting a member of prison staff from HMP Havering in the northwest of England, "It helps the men to feel normal. They feel part of something bigger. It allows the men to socialise and be outside. It has attracted people who wouldn't normally be involved with the gym. The opportunity to volunteer has encouraged people to tail walk and scan barcodes, which has supported social interaction. We have tail walkers who encourage new participants if it's their first time. We have a volunteer who is closing in on 70 events, which is just amazing." These are examples of truly meaningful collaborations between organisations, with both sides benefiting in tangible ways. And a bit like our previous learning around understanding both actual problems and effective solutions, these successful collaborations have come about through careful consideration around how organisations and communities can truly benefit, and in the absence of a need for either to dominate the other or gain a competitive advantage or exclusively own the solution. My final learning completes a circle back to the beginning and the need to engineer in volunteer opportunities, and they are opportunities. We often get asked why Parkrun is so successful, and we're reasonably confident that we know the answer. Because we believe all human beings have an innate, built-in need to be active, outdoors, and social. Over the last 18 years, we have heard so many thousands of stories around Parkrun, around how Parkrun has changed people's lives and often saved people's lives. Again and again and again, people tell us that taking part in their local event has been transformational for their mental and physical health. But never do they state that the reason for this transformation is a faster time, or is it thanks to finishing ahead of someone else, or is it due to any other athletic-focused KPI? Every single time, it involves a combination of those three simple things: active, outdoors, social. And actually, we increasingly believe that the social component may well be the most impactful of those. Look around modern society and you'll see continual reduction of opportunities to be present with other people, to be together, to share in both triumph and hardship, the good times and the bad. In many cases, we've forgotten what it means to be human, let alone what it means to be a runner. Nowhere have we seen this more powerfully than our prison-based events, where some young people particularly are being told, well done, for the first time in their lives. They're inspiring others for the first time in their lives. And they feel part of something positive for the first time in their lives. We all need that, and I think we've forgotten. That's it for me, I think. We've learned so much from our journey so far, and we continue to learn more every day. Whilst I would never presume to tell any of you what your events or businesses need most, I hope that you may be able to take something from the stories I've shared. As we look to the future at Parkrun, this time next year we will record our 100 millionth instance of participation. A year later we'll turn 20. 3 years after that we'll be double the size we are today. And within a decade or two, we expect to record our 1 billionth instance of walking, running, and volunteering. We consider nothing impossible. We will challenge our assumptions daily. We will work hard to understand actual problems and to implement actual solutions. We'll light as many candles as possible, and we will work tirelessly to increase meaningful human interaction. Thank you.